Hello, I'm finally back to talking about books. And by the way, if you hear any background noises or anything, just ignore it. I usually record in the middle of the night, but it's currently 3:51 and I just want to use tonight to edit. Anyway, I've had this idea for quite a while, and I briefly talk about it when I talk about Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky in my 3 books that I think are clever video. And today I was listening to the song Through the Eyes of a Child by Aurora. Beautiful song. I think I cry every single time I listen to it. Now, back to the topic. Some of the books that I want to talk about this time are Imaginary Friend, The Dull Funeral by Kate Hamer, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima. These stories are either written from the point of view of a child or from a third-person POV, but the narration mostly follows the children and explains what is going on in their heads. And I think I have a soft spot for adult fiction novels that discuss very adult, serious, and dark problems, but they are also told from the perspective of a child. It hits different. It's such a bizarre feeling when child characters who are still very innocent, very naive, and they haven't learned what a dark place the world is. They explain whatever's happening around or to them very offhandedly, very nonchalant, but you as an adult reader know what the actual weight of the issue is. Okay, let's start with Imaginary Friend. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but for context, it is about a 7-year-old child named Christopher who started hearing voices in his head, and he has this imaginary friend, the nice man, who tells him he needs to fight the hissing lady. He kind of has, I guess I would say, certain superpowers, but the deal is that the stronger he gets, the more pain he has to bear, because he is actually bearing the pain of the people around him. At 7-year-old, he is forced to learn about very adult pain, and this changes him. There's a line in the book that gave me chills just thinking about this. By the way, the book is from a third-person POV, so the line goes, she, Christopher's mother, had seen the sheriff do the same thing on their first date. She had witnessed that instinctive need to make sure the coast was clear, but never in a 7-year-old. I think this hits me because naturally a mother would want to protect her child, especially if the child is very young. But then, when the roles are reversed and this 7-year-old is trying to protect the mother, you know that this kid has seen some shit. And Christopher's mother here is wondering what makes her child so cautious. What does he know about the world? And that's Imaginary Friend. Second novel, The Dull Funeral. The story is about a 13-year-old girl named Ruby who runs away from home because her foster father is very abusive, and she also wants to find her biological parents. And while she is away from home, she stays with a couple of friends who are also siblings. Oh, and by the way, she can see ghosts, and she is friends with a ghost boy, I guess. Now, the thing about these friends she's living with, their parents left them. And the parents used to send in money for them to, sustain themselves. But one day it just stopped. And I don't think we ever learn about what happened with the parents. Anyway, so these kids are just forced to survive by themselves and hunt for food. I remember the house being not very well kept because these are kids. And the older sibling, the older sister, having to kind of step up and pretend that she's tough and that she can take care of her siblings and friend. So it was a bit heartbreaking to read that. Moving on to Kill a Mockingbird. I think this would be the one that people are most familiar with. The story is told from the point of view of Scout, or Jean Louise Finch, a 6-year-old girl. She has an older brother, Jem, who is 10, and their father, Atticus Finch, is a lawyer in 1930s Maycomb. Maycomb? I don't know. When I first read the book, I had absolutely zero idea, zero knowledge of what the story is about. I didn't look it up, I didn't read the summary, I just jumped right into the book. So at first, I thought the story is about these kids and their mysterious neighbor who never comes out of the house, or as they call him, Buradli. But the story is actually about racism. Atticus is a defense attorney and he has to prove the innocence of a black man who is accused of raping a white woman. The story is set in 1930s. I remember the trial. Scout and Jem are there and they listen to pretty much everything, and I remember having the impression that Scout doesn't fully understand the weight of what is actually going on. I mean, she understands that based on what Atticus says, the evidence and witnesses, the man is innocent. He's been falsely accused. It feels like a shut and done case. But what Scout doesn't understand is why he is still found guilty by the judge and all 12 juries. And I kind of get the feeling that Scout is more concerned that her father loses the case, which makes sense. She's 6 years old. And another thing about the book, I think it's quite telling that the story begins and ends with Buradli, because as children, they're just focusing on what they think is interesting. The trial feels more like a subplot, if anything. Now compare this to Go Set a Watchman, the sequel to this book. Scout, she's no longer Scout, but Jean Louise. She's an adult now. And she sees this issue, this racism, very differently because she understands more. She's seen a lot more compared to when she was a child. The perspectives had changed, but each remains very important. Now, last book, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. Yes, it's a long title and it's actually a very short novel, but damn, it's messed up. It's about a boy named Noboru and his friends who have a certain idea of how a man should act like. They think that a man should be aggressive and a real father is one who hits his children. Yikes. And Noboru also has this notion that a man should follow the calling towards greatness. A sailor should stay on the sea because that is the greatest calling of all. And at first he idolized Ryuji for that very reason. Ryuji is a sailor, but then Ryuji decides to retire and get married to Noboru's mother. And Noboru thinks that's disgraceful and it's embarrassing. And it's even more embarrassing because Ryuji is not like a man. He's not very aggressive, he's a pretty reasonable guy. And because of this, Noboru, along with his friends, turns to hate Ryuji. Toxic masculinity, I tell you. It's to the point that they plan to do something very violent towards Ryuji, and they practice it on a kitten first. It's graphic, very serial killer vibe, you know. It makes you think, why? Why do these kids have such twisted ideas about men and about life? Where did they learn this from? I don't know, man. Things are much more sinister when it's kids. Either kids witnessing something evil or kids doing evil things. It's just so much more unsettling. And I like that in fiction. Because I feel like the response that you give as a reader is much more emotional. You care more and you think about it more. And in terms of writing, it works well too. Writing from the perspective of a child helps you show and not tell. Basically, showing, not telling, as far as I understand, is when you use actions and words of characters to explain the situation without spelling out the situation to the readers. Because children understand actions, they see it, but they don't understand the intent behind it. I think an example would be Christopher's friends in Imaginary Friend. One of them offhandedly mentions that his parents sleep in different rooms. We as readers can understand that the parents are having marital problems without the character actually saying, "Oh, I think my parents are fighting." Because he doesn't even know that. Or showing how Mary always goes to church and thinks about God without actually writing down Mary is very religious. That's showing, not telling. So yeah, I think that's all I want to say. I highly recommend reading those books. They're interesting and they offer a fresh perspective on things. And thank you for listening. Bye.